Well, I'm happy to be here. I had a tour of the house, and it's the first time I had been in the house since I was 18 years old. Wow. Okay, good morning. I think she told you who I was. I'm Fiddia Laxton. And Marjorie Rawlings came and lived with my father and grandmother around 1931, before my dad was married. And she participated in all the household activities, and he took her on the river, and she learned about hunting, fishing, about the animals, and about the he introduced her to different people, friends and relatives that had interesting stories to tell. And she made extensive notes and remembered, and those things show up in South Moon Under, which was the first novel she wrote, and many of them show up again in, additionally in Yearling. Where she ate what they ate. She learned how these people lived off the land, basically, and what a tenuous life they had. It was like hand to mouth. I mean, they grew their own food, they ate venison from the forest and fish from the river, and Grandma always had a big garden. And in order to have a garden, even there now, is difficult because of the deer. And so I can remember my dad most every night would get up through the night and go out with his gun and his headlight to see if there were deer out there about to come and get in the garden and eat it up. And he would kill the deer, and of course we ate them then. She went fishing with him. He always, in my memory, had a fish trap in the river. Big wire fish trap with cone-shaped chicken wire pointing in. They could go in, but they couldn't go back out. And illegal, of course. And he may have done some of that fishing with dynamite. You know, if you want a big group of fish to have a fish fry or something, also illegal. Throw a stick of dynamite in there, and they would just rise to the surface and pick them up. She helped my grandma wash her handmade cotton batted quilts that would be so heavy when they were wet. And so that was a big deal to my grandma, to have the help to get those things washed and out on the clothesline to dry. She learned about the phases of the moon, when the deer fed and when they didn't. And that's where the name of the book came from, South Moon Under. That was when the moon was underneath the earth, and that's when the deer came out to feed. The dark of the night. And she helped him with his moonshine still. You know, this has been the deep, dark depths of the Big Depression that started in the late 20s, and And so there were just not jobs to be had. And so at the time she lived with him, I think that was probably their main source of income was through the sale of the moonshine he made. And she helped him with that, and you read in the South Moon Under, pretty good description of how it all went. And of course she was not only a friend, but also a customer. She used a lot of those stories that people told her, and all the people that she used in the book, she used fake names, except for Piety. She liked that name, Piety, and that was my grandmother's name. There are several mentions, I think, in South Moon Under of the storekeeper in Eureka. That's who he bought his sugar from to make his moonshine. Well, the rest of the story is that the storekeeper had a teenage daughter, and a couple years later he married that storekeeper's daughter, who's my mother, Margaret Flanagan Fiddia, and and of course the storekeeper was my grandfather. I was born in 1934, and Marge Rawlings had been a friend since before Dad was married, so she was always a family friend, somebody we knew. She would come to the house, and I had been here a number of times. Of course, she was a very busy, important person. It wasn't somebody that we saw all the time, but she was a presence. My earliest memory that I recall regarding Marge was the first time I saw the ocean. Marge wanted my dad to do some work on her beach house in Crescent Beach, which is south of St. Augustine. And she was going to be away. She and her aunt were going on a trip somewhere. And so she suggested he bring the family over and stay in her house while she was gone. And I had not started school yet. So I don't remember very much about it, except that it was up on the dunes right above the beach, and there was a long set of wooden steps going down to the beach. I remember that, and the scratchy wool bathing suit that had. The first novel she wrote she'd done some short stories and other things, but the first novel was South Moon Under. And it had some success. I didn't know until very recently that, I knew of course that she won the Pulitzer Prize for the Yearling, but what I didn't know was that South Moon Under had been one of the finalists for the Pulitzer Prize. Well, she wrote South Moon Under, and that had quite a bit of sales and notoriety. And she lived here in Alachua County. Well, where I live and where she lived with my father and grandmother is down in Marion County. The county seat of Marion County is Ocala. And the powers that be, the Chamber of Commerce types, were not too happy with Marge because she was telling the whole world about these primitive, backwoods, hand-to-mouth people in their fair county. But then when she wrote the Yearling and won the Pulitzer Prize, they kind of changed their minds a little bit. And they decided that they would give her a banquet. They would honor her with a banquet. And I was, I don't think I was in school yet. I was 5 or 6 years old. But I remember, well-dressed, city-looking man coming out to our house to invite my family to the banquet. I'm sure that was with Marge's insistence. But we dressed all up, and the family consisted of my mother, dad, grandmother, and me. I was the only child then. And it was held in the hotel in Ocala. And what I remember about it was that, there was this big table laid out with placemats, and they had to scramble around to make a seat for me. They hadn't expected that they would bring the kid. And all I remember about the dinner was this great big piece of chicken that was on each plate. Great big piece. And that they had presented her with a carving from a local wood carver that represented Jody, the boy in the Yearling, and his deer.
So you think that might be the one that's in the house? Was it?
Oh no!
Oh,
This was something bigger. So high. I mean, it was a big carving. I will after I get through it. If you have questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. I was telling someone here today that after she married Norton Baskin, and he was going to start a hotel there in St. Augustine, they got my dad to go up and help renovate the building for it. And he would stay up there through the week and then come home on weekends. And I think that was about 1944, when the year my baby sister was born. And she was always getting him to come and do things for her here. She especially wanted him to keep up the coal plant that she had for electricity before this rural area got electricity. Exciting things going on. Go on. But she sold the rights for the Yearling to have a movie made, to MGM, I think. And so they did quite a bit of their filming in the forest areas, and their headquarters was there at Silver Springs near Ocala. And she got them to hire my dad as the head carpenter for building of the sets. He was a good carpenter. He was a carpenter and electrician by trade. And this was in the 40s, and there were jobs beginning to be had. That after World War II started in 1941, there were more jobs. And back in those days, and in most of my memory, He still kept it still most of the time, but it was just for his own use and some of his good friends who sold it to him. But he didn't rely on it for a living then. I had mentioned she used made up names, and the storylines were fictitious. But she used real incidences that Dad and his friends had told her, but of course changed the names. And when she did the descriptions, she would describe people but not use the same name. I know there was a man in the community that had a speech impediment and maybe some mental deficiencies too, I'm not sure. But she captured that in the book about the way he spoke. And she, to me, one of the geniuses of the book was how she captured the speech of these cracker people. And when she described my Grandma Potty, I could see my Grandma Potty. She was a little bitty woman. She had her hair pulled back tight, and a tight little bun on the back. And the speech she got entirely right. And the speech of the others too, including my dad. But in the physical description of my dad, she didn't describe him anything like he really looked. As you saw in the picture, he was kind of tall and lanky, and you know, we've got some American Indian blood back there somewhere, and in the description in the book of Lent, that was the character modeled after him, the lifestyle was the same, but she pictured him as having red hair and, you know, just nothing that he looked like. And trapping fish in the river, making moonshine. So she didn't want to make him obviously identifiable. And in those books she had used fictitious names. But then when she wrote the book on Cross Creek about her life here and the people she knew here, by that time I think she had lived here some time, she knew these people a long time, and she felt comfortable in using their real names, which it turns out was a mistake, because one of her friends, when she saw how much money she thought Marjorie was making, she got jealous and she decided to sue Marjorie. My understanding was that she sued her because Marjorie had described Zelma Kaysen as my profane friend. I didn't know Zelma, but I've known people that did know her and understand that was an accurate description. And I remember when Marjorie came out to our house one evening after Dad got home from work, and she brought him a copy of Cross Creek and wanted him to read it in case her lawyers might want to call him as a witness. I don't recall that he was ever called to do that, but she was, well, of course she didn't, I I've forgotten the amount of money she was suing for, but Marge thought it was more than she could afford to pay. And she was worried about that, but even more so, she was just distraught that this woman she thought was her friend had sued her. And the trial it was a long drawn out thing. The end result being that the court found in favor of Zelma and awarded her a payment of $1 plus court costs. And I understand that that's a landmark Florida case. That, and I think she was. They did not. They didn't find her guilty of libel, but they came up with something else called about the right of privacy. She had violated her right of privacy. And that's the first time everybody's been called on that. So, for that reason, it's a landmark case. I guess still is that the lawyers refer to when they're trying to try some of that case. And I mentioned that my dad, when Marjorie would be coming, she let him know that she was going to be coming to the creek, and she wanted to be sure her power plant was working so she would have power while she was here. And then when the power people finally brought power to Cross Creek, she gave the plant to my dad. Of course, we still didn't have power out there where we were. My little sister, who was born while Dad was working in St. Augustine, she was 5 years old, and I was 15 when she got leukemia. And this was in the days when you first started hearing about leukemia. So, there was just nothing they knew to do. And she died after about 3 months being sick. She died a week before Christmas. They had told the family that they needed to have an early Christmas for her because she probably wasn't going to make it. And that was it. They were in this little clinic in McIntosh that Dr. Strange ran there, and she was in there for most of those 3 months. And the little community there, they asked Gracie what she wanted for Christmas, and she said she wanted a red wagon. So that hardware store there, or its employees, I'm not sure who participated, they bought her a huge big red wagon. And somebody gave her some dolls, and she was way too sick to play with any of them, but they did have a little pine tree there in the room for our Christmas tree, and the newspaper sent out photographers and pictures were taken, and it made the newspapers. But that was a week before Christmas then that she died. And on Christmas, Marge Rawlings came to our house. Marge Rawlings, who was a worldwide known author, could have spent Christmas with anybody in the world, came to our house loaded with presents for the family, and cooked Christmas dinner on our old wooden stove. And what was outstanding about the dinner itself, all I remember was the turkey. Now, we had eaten turkey, wild turkey that my dad had killed, but it was always cut up and cooked. But this turkey was a whole big, fat, bought turkey, roasted in the oven and sitting on the table. So that really impressed me about her. I was 15, I was old enough to realize what an important person she was. And to think that she had taken time to do that really impressed me. When I was a senior in high school, one day my dad was coming to Cross Creek to Marge, and he told me to get dressed and come with him because Marge wanted to see me. And I got here, and she received me in her bedroom, on her bed, propped up in pillows, and it seemed like that was her working space, you know. And it turns out that it was my dad who had asked her to talk to me about what to do after high school. And she advised me to go through at least 2 years of college. It was my understanding that that's what she had done, and that had served her well. And she thought that's what I should do. Well, I didn't take her advice then. I got married instead. But after I had 4 children, I did start college and got a bachelor's degree. And then many years later, I got a master's degree in social work. The last time I saw Marge was at my Grandma Piety's funeral. That was in the spring of 1953. And it was in December of that same year then that Marge died. And I remember very well because I was living in Palatka, and I had just had my first baby at the little clinic there in Palatka. And my parents came to see, I say they came to see me, they came to see that new grandbaby, but they were telling me they had just come from Marge's funeral. And my son was born on December 13th, 1953, so it was just a few days before that she had died. In some of her earlier writings, letters and things, she had referred to my dad as a lad, like she was a lot older than he was, but she was only 5 years older than he was. And I thought it was not strange, coincidental, I don't know, that she was 5 years older than he was, and she died 5 years before he did. So they were about the same age when they died. And that's my memories of Marge Rawlings. Do you have any questions?
would you care to tell us how your children are today? What are they doing?
Oh, well, one of my daughters-in-law is here with us. My oldest son is an electrical engineer, and he lives in Virginia up near DC. And he has 4 children. The youngest one's graduating from high school this year. My second son lives next door to me, and this is his wife. He has 3 children, 2 grandchildren, another daughter getting married this.
3 grandchildren.
Oh yes, I forgot. The brand new one, she's 1 month old today. I forgot that other great grandchild. That had me. And then my daughter, who lives in Ocala, has 2 adult children and 5 grandchildren. So that's adding up on the great grands, isn't it? And she's an esthetician. She makes you beautiful. Does stuff in the face. Didn't work on me. I mean, she didn't work on me. And then the youngest one lives in Tallahassee, and he has 2 children. One's a geologist. Last I heard, he was in Midland, Texas, and the daughter will be graduating from college this spring. Okay, and somebody over there had a question.
Can you tell us more about the movie when they were filming here? What you remember, being that it won the Academy Award in 1947? How did Marjorie feel about?
Oh, I don't know how she felt about the movie. What I remember is that some of the movie crew would on a back and forth out to the forest between Silver Springs and the sets would sometimes stop at my grandfather's store there in Eureka, and the storekeeper in South Moon they would stop there and kid around with us kids that were hanging around. And I remember that my dad talking about, you know, he was a good carpenter, and he built things square and true, and they were trying to represent this old cabin in the woods, and so it was supposed to be crooked and old, and so that was quite a change for him to try to build it that way. That's all I remember about the movie itself.
First of all, thank you so much. This is amazing, and my heart's thumping with excitement. I curate the Marjorie Rawlings papers at the University of Florida.
Oh.
And I was very interested to hear more about your recollections about moonshining. Specifically, did your father continue distilling moonshine after the end of Prohibition, which would have been just before you were born? Did you have moonshine in the house, and did your dad sell it? Or did he go legit, or did he take up another trade or concentrate just on carpentry after 1933?
In my memory, he usually had a still, but he was not relying on it for a living. He did carpentry and electrical work. You know, electricity was just coming to these rural areas, and so he built houses and wired them, and then sometimes he wired houses that had already been built. And but he most always had a still, one place or the other, in my memory. But he wasn't relying on it for a living. But he just made it so he could have the good moonshine. And couldn't tell you personally, but people who imbibe and or know about those things said it was very good whiskey. And he would make it for himself and sell a little bit to some of his friends, including Marge.
Well, thank you so much. We need a round of applause. This event today has been brought to you by the Friends of the Marjorie Rawlings Farm and the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Historic State Park. And as part of our appreciation to Carol, we want to give her this certificate of appreciation and a lifetime membership in the Friends and a lapel pin from our celebration last year of the 75th anniversary of Cross Creek and Cross Creek's Booklet. Thank you again for coming, and please visit our booth over there. We have some literature about the farm, about the Friends of the Farm, and some books for sale if you're interested, and nut cards.
It was warming up a little bit.